A very warm welcome to the Swedish EU Presidency Conference on how media policy is affected by the developments and changes in the media and communication landscape. This is one of the very first Swedish presidency conferences, so we're still at something like dress rehearsal stage. Please forgive any small mishaps. But I think looking at the program, we can promise a quite delightful dress rehearsal. My name is Karin Svanberg-Sjöwall. I am, since a few months back, the State Secretary to the Swedish Minister of Culture, who is also responsible for media and democracy policy. And I am very pleased with the high-level participation of keynote speakers and panelists today and tomorrow, and I really look forward to hearing interesting thoughts on stage. I also hope that they will trigger even more interesting discussions during the breaks, at the dinner tables tonight, and of course at breakfast and lunch tomorrow. I'd like to start by just offering you a little bit of practical information before introducing the first speakers. And I would also like to mention that the conference is being filmed, and it will be possible to watch afterwards. We will have in total 3 sessions today, including this opening session. The following session will focus on stock-taking of recent EU tech regulation, and the last one today on the future of media policy. It will be a long but exciting afternoon. Tomorrow, the program will start at 9:30 with 2 more specialized sessions, and one will focus on the changing roles of our national media authorities, and the following session on media literacy and the need for a well-informed public. And to finish off, we have asked the moderators to give some thoughts on what has been said. Before you head off tomorrow, there will also be a late lunch. If there is time, moderators will give the possibility to pose questions or to give comments, and if you missed the opportunity to speak in one of the sessions, please don't hesitate to approach the relevant moderator during a break so that we can benefit from your thoughts in the final discussion between moderators tomorrow. We hope to end the last session today that you have a good hour before the buses leave for tonight's dinner. And as this is Sweden, and we like to be punctual, you are expected to be ready to leave at 7 o'clock sharp from the main entrance. So please be there in time so as to not risk being left behind. The bus ride going north to the university city of Uppsala will take approximately 30 minutes. And after dinner, buses will take us back here. The hotel bar will, of course, be open when we get back for all the urgent discussions that cannot wait until morning. On a very practical note then, tomorrow you will also be asked to check out from the hotel before the conference starts. So please leave your bags and coats in the wardrobe out in the main foyer because they will not be allowed into this room. And finally, before we start, there are 2 questions that I would like for you to keep in mind all throughout these 2 days. Firstly, how has recent changes in tech policy and regulation affected the media sector and media policy? And secondly, what should be the focus for an up-to-date media policy in 2023? And with those words, I would like to give the word to the Swedish Minister of Culture, Mrs. Parisa Liljestrand.
Thank you, Karin. Dear Vice President Jourova, if you are here yet, dear participants and experts and national representatives, let me echo my State Secretary Karin Svanberg-Sjöwall in welcoming you to one of the first conferences actually in Sweden and in the Swedish EU Presidency. Since last October, I have had the honor to hold the position as Minister for Culture. This portfolio entails many important issues, not at least media and democracy policy. Media policy is, as you are well aware of, about safeguarding the fundamental rights of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Free and pluralistic media is the heart of democracy. The Swedish Presidency in the field of culture and media will, to put it short, be focusing on freedom. Media freedom, artistic freedom, freedom to create, and ways to contribute to a free Ukraine. We will work hard to bring these issues forward, not least in your own field, continuing the accomplished work done by our Czech colleagues, of course, on the European Media Freedom Act. A lot is happening in the EU when it comes to media and tech regulation. I have already mentioned the European Media Freedom Act. Even though we have not planned to focus directly on the legal act during this conference, I hope that the themes that will be discussed during these days can contribute to further constructive thoughts. Many of you who are gathered here today are instrumental to this process, and I am sure that you will bring the dialogue and the discussions on this important act forward. There is also a lot happening recently in the field of tech regulation in the EU. I think that everyone has had to work hard to keep up actually with the new policy and the new regulation that is now starting to be implemented. And we certainly need to discuss how the new initiatives will affect industry, regulators, and public in practice. Our hope is that this conference will contribute to greater understanding, not least when it comes to the growing tech sector and the traditional media companies and how they are affected by the new policies that are developing. I really and truly want to wish you fruitful and interesting discussions during these 2 days. And as Minister for Culture and responsible for all issues regarding cultural heritage, I am very happy that you will be visiting beautiful and historic Uppsala Castle tonight for what I am sure will be a lovely dinner. Thank you, welcome, and I hope you will have 2 really interesting days here.
Thank you very much, Parisa. So the next item on the agenda is a video message from Commissioner Thierry Breton, who, among many other things, is responsible for matters related to the single market for digital services. Unfortunately, Mr. Breton was not able to join us here in Stockholm, but we will, as I previously said, have the pleasure to hear a video message from him where he will give us a short overview of recent tech regulation.
Dear Minister, dear Vera, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Swedish Presidency for organizing this conference on how European tech regulation affects democratic discourse and media policy. This topic is very timely. As we get into 2023, it is a good moment to look back at how far we have come in organizing our digital space and what remains to be achieved for our democracy and, of course, our rule of law. I'm confident we will do so thanks to Europe's leadership, anticipation, and acceleration. Let's speak first of Europe's leadership. It is now a widely accepted fact that with the Digital Services Act and Digital Market Act, DMA, Europe has set a global standard for platforms regulation. This was not a given. We needed to set the rules of the game and organize the digital space with clear rights, obligations, and safeguards. We needed also to restore trust in the digital space. It was a matter of survival for our democracies in the 21st century. And it is natural that Europe took the lead. Because Europe is the first single market in the free world. And, or let's say the bigger one. And 2023 will be a very important year for the enforcement of the much awaited Digital Services Act and Digital Market Act. In short, platforms will not longer behave like they are too big to care. Very large online platforms and search engines have, of course, a responsibility to tackle online disinformation and other societal risks, even if their ownership changes. And thanks to the DSA, online services will have to take a greater responsibility in addressing illegal content. Alongside, the DMA will regulate large online platforms that act as gatekeepers between end users and business users, including media services. This brings me to my second point on anticipation. My key message: be ready. Things are already starting to change on the ground, as online platforms are anticipating the rules and modifying their processes. Because no platform in the world can do without 450 million users. My services are also working closely with member states to support them in appointing their digital services coordinators. In order to ensure that the DSA yields results, it is absolutely crucial that these authorities are appointed in due time and that they have the necessary independence, expertise and resources to carry out their task. And of course, I encourage you to start this process without delay. The DSA and DMA package sets a comprehensive framework for the digital space. But we also need to help our citizens navigate this space and protect information as a public good. And this is an area where I see Europe accelerating and also delivering in 2023. To protect and empower our citizens in the modern media environment, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive requires video sharing platforms and member states to take measures to develop and promote media literacy skills. This kind of know-how is essential for citizens to look at their sources of information critically and be able to detect false or misleading content. We will make sure that video sharing platforms deliver on this obligation and assess if they are taking appropriate actions. And soon we will have an additional tool, the Media Freedom Act, the missing puzzle for the organization of our digital space. The Commission has highlighted worrying trends threatening the independence of media across the EU in its rule of law reports. With the MFA, the EU will have a single set of rules to reinforce editorial independence of media services across the single market, both in the digital and more traditional environment. We'll bring more legal certainty for providers and users across the 27 member states, creating a real single market for media services. The Media Freedom Act will also play preventive roles. Often, we take our democracy, our independent media, for granted. We don't believe something is possible until it's too late. But let's face it, there is no country free from the risk to media. With this in mind, I look forward to the conclusion of successful negotiations between co-legislators this year in order to make the Media Freedom Act a reality. I know that we, Vera and I, can count on the determination of the Swedish Presidency to advance on this ambitious timeline. Because we share the commitment to improve the quality of democratic discourse, especially online. So I would like to wish the best of luck and success to the Swedish Presidency, which comes at a defining moment for the EU. And this being said, I would like to thank you all of you, and also to wish you a very, very fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton, for this message. Now, it is time, finally, for our keynote speakers. No more politicians on the stage for a while. And the first one that I'm very happy to introduce is Mr. Christophe Deloire, the Director General of Reporters Without Borders. Your organization is really at the very forefront of the discussion on media freedom and the importance of news journalism. And for me, as someone who's dabbled a little bit in journalism myself, it will be very, very interesting to take part of your reflection in this time of change, but also of very big challenges for journalists around the globe. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear Minister, dear all, I have to start with an official statement. This speech is given by a human being in flesh and blood. It is not delegated to a machine. My text wasn't drafted by an artificial intelligence. And as a human being, I want to express my real pleasure to give this address in a country which is ranked third country out of 180 countries in the World Press Freedom Index. It's a real pleasure. That's clearly something that the OpenAI product GPT-3 could not say. The democratic challenge is today's topic. There are many democratic challenges, but one transcends all the others, the democratic challenge of the public space, of the public square. The founder of modern India, Nehru Gandhi, asked, what is press freedom? Is it the freedom of media owners to influence content with their money? Is it the freedom of journalists to write what they have in mind? Or is it the right of the public? This question is more crucial than ever, but we experience an accumulation of many other complex questions that Gandhi could not have figured out. Do we expect IA to comply with democratic principles? In case yes, which principles? How do we avoid that algorithms are the agents of private ministries of truth? The change of paradigm is so strong that we cannot just incorporate classical doctrines. Pluralism does not mean anything for Alexa or Siri. Private messaging systems are neither private nor public communication, they are both. What about those mixed spaces, etc., etc.? A lot of concepts seem like outdated, or at least the concrete implementation. What does responsibility and integrity mean for Elon Musk? Here we have an answer, nothing. The problem is that the democracies have not clarified what the responsibilities of social media networks are, or what appropriate sanctions on accounts are. What are the rights and duties of a social media account? This is a very complicated question. Those people, I mean the heads of platforms or shareholders, will continue to make arbitrary decisions if democracies do not specify very concrete safeguards. A first necessary step is to complement our set of concepts. We have the freedom of opinion and expression. And we have press freedom, which is balanced with journalistic duties that have been established in history through media regulation, professionalization of journalism, methodology, and self-regulatory ethics. In an era of disintermediation, where clearly journalists, media outlets are just a part, and every day maybe a smaller part of the game, when everybody can be a media or pretend to be a media, there is a huge gap that we have to fill. We surely cannot extend the rules of journalism to everybody. This is not feasible, and would it be feasible, it wouldn't make sense. At the same time, having journalists being like a sort of museum in the jungle will lead to the destruction of trustworthiness of news and information. It is necessary to develop a concept around the right to information. The right to information, as defined in the International Declaration on Information and Democracy, consists of the freedom to seek, receive, and access reliable information. The right to reliable information is a right for everybody. This doctrine's move means that if you violate a basic right of citizens and human beings if you disinform, manipulate, or spread rumors. This evolution of the doctrine is really important. It can be the basis for a new logic of legislation. The right to reliable information will allow for the development of responsibility in the new information space. It will help to set up and legitimize new legislations in front of propaganda. It could be added in our constitutions and be the basis of our laws. In order to implement the right to reliable information, we have to work at least 3 levels. First level, the level of journalists, the level of press freedom, I would say. Defend journalists worthy of the name. Right now, there are 530 journalists behind bars to date, a sad record. In 2022, 57 journalists were killed, which means that 1 journalist dies every week in the world for doing his or her job. We notice press freedom violations inside Europe itself. Second level, develop a media market that favors editorial independence and sustainability and ethics. Third level, impose democratic safeguards in the information and communication space beyond journalism. That's broader than journalism. We have to connect the dots between press freedom, media policy, tech policy. They cannot be disconnected anymore. The EU aims at and starts demonstrating leadership, as Thierry Breton said, at those 3 levels. The list of European laws which were recently adopted or are underway is impressive: DSA, DMA, Data Act, IA Act, EMFA, European Media Freedom Act. Regarding the implementation of the DSA, which is an important move, we know that we cannot rely on the platforms for the assessment of the systemic risks. There is a need to at least assess the assessment and surely more. In order to reinforce the legitimacy of this regulation, the EU Commission will have to delegate some of its own responsibilities to independent bodies. It will be crucial in the future. The proposed EMFA is unprecedented too. Yet, it needs clarity on many provisions like on the ones to ensure editorial independence. On platforms' responsibility, EMFA is a strong opportunity for much more ambition in the fight against disinformation through the promotion of trustworthy information. The Union must come up with further responses consistent with the scale and gravity of the situation. Let me highlight 3. First response: gather democracies so that they create a common democratic information space. We know that both tech companies and despotic regimes in very different ways want to impose a new world media order. In front of this, we need a multilateralism of democracies. The Partnership on Information and Democracy, initiated by Reporters Without Borders, has now been endorsed by 50 countries on all continents, including 25 member states of the European Union. Sweden is one of the signatory countries, and we would welcome if Sweden would play a bigger role in this effort. We hope that the new government will amplify its engagement. The civil society-led implementation body of the partnership, the Forum on Information and Democracy, has drafted hundreds of concrete recommendations for policy frameworks about tech companies. Dozens of those recommendations from the forum have inspired the EU Code of Practice Against Disinformation. Hundreds of other existing recommendations could clearly fill the gaps of the DSA and the Code of Practice. Further obligations are needed in the fields of transparency of algorithms, private messaging systems, and pluralism of algorithms. Principles for responsibility regimes for social media networks and their users have to be imposed by democracies to platforms. Ideas are available on the table. There is also a need for external audits of tech services. We need for the information chaos the equivalent of what the IPCC is for climate change. The plans for the Observatory on Information and Democracy are available. We have promising discussions with the OECD, but the EU should sustain this effort too. We call on the EU to use the expertise now built up by the Forum on Information Democracy and take full advantage of this new multilateralism. A multilateralism that connects governments with the civil society, which is a key for the legitimacy of decisions. And clearly, the European Union can play a bigger leadership role in this effort. Second response. Make compulsory mechanisms to promote reliable sources of information. Algorithms promote sensationalism, lies, hatred, etc. Beliefs prevail over facts. It's urgent to reverse this logic, which unfairly disadvantages quality journalism. There is no integrity factor in the algorithmic indexation. Trustworthiness is not a criteria at all. It is essential to oblige platforms to promote reliable information sources, not just to promise that they will do, but to take very concrete commitments that can be assessed. We've made a huge progress with a market solution which is non-discretionary, which is scalable, which is European. It is called the Journalism Trust Initiative, JTI. With stakeholders from all over the world, we developed an ISO-type standard about journalism under the aegis of the European Standardization Committee. In order to verify compliance, the certification market is now available. As we are here in Sweden, I have to mention that we did work with Swedish stakeholders. TT News was part of the standardization process. Svenska Dagbladet entered the JTI process. What we have to achieve is that digital platforms, advertisers, philanthropists, public funders provide incentives to certified media outlets. We have made progress in this field too. The Journalism Trust Initiative, JTI, is mentioned in the EMFA proposal, and the reference to JTI has been included in the EU Code of Practice against disinformation as a trust indicator. But for the moment, if we have a concrete look, only one platform committed in this Code of Practice to work on amplifying reliable sources of information, just one. That's Microsoft. The reluctance of other ones proves that a voluntary commitment is not enough. The EU should move to enforcement. The EMFA, especially its Article 17, is an important opportunity for that. European standard, but universal reach. 50% of the first 500 media entered into the JTI process come from the Global South. JTI can be used as a criteria for the allocation of development aid earmarked for the media. We are having discussions with development agencies, and we will be delighted to discuss it with the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, dear to us. Third response, establish a system for the European information, a system of protection for the European information space. We need to address the asymmetries between open and closed countries. The current globalization of information and